Chapter 10. Phyllis Ford's small shoes tapped briskly across the stretch of hard-packed earth beside the courthouse and turned into the doorway of the sheriff's office. She was a vastly changed person from the bespectacled and bewildered young lady who had stepped hastily off the Hopewell stage a few weeks before. Her eyes were bright and hair becoming arranged beneath a pert straw hat. The light-colored calico dress displayed the litheness of her figure. Her steel-rimmed spectacles were now used only in the privacy of her hotel room. Phyllis had emerged from mausoleum of musky tomes into the rough and ready world of Powder Valley, where there were 10 young men to every eligible young girl. Like a drab crystalline transformed into a colorful butterfly, she was trying her wings and found them good. The sheriff's approving glance ran over her tanned features. "Sit down and rest, ma'am," he invited cordially. "It sure looks like Powder Valley agrees with you."
"I love it," she declared with enthusiasm. "Even if we never find the mine, I don't think I'll ever leave this country."
"Well," drawled Pat, "there's quite a passel of young roosters who'd object to your pulling out. Young Pat O'Leary down at the bank, and Tommy Markham at the store, for instance. Well, and then there's Bill Williams mooning around as though he'd lost $1,000,000, and didn't I see you parading with that Englishman Plumford?"
"It's about Mr. Plumford I've come to see you."
Phyllis dropped into a chair and swung her legs.
"He's very well cultivated and really quite charming."
"Yeah," commented Pat dryly.
"He wants to buy the Mirage mine," she said gaily, little guessing she was dropping a bombshell.
"Can he locate it if he buys it?"
"He hopes to." Phyllis sombered. "The situation is this, Mr. Stevens. I have found an occupation, and I plan to open a lunchroom in the Jewel Hotel. They have a big kitchen and a dining room, but both have been closed for years."
She smiled.
"Now don't look so doubtful. I'm quite a good cook, and there's not a place in town where a person can get a good meal."
"There's the Chinks," ejected Pat. He had been sliding into a stool at Ah Fung's steamy lunch counter for years. Phyllis raised her hands in mocked horror.
"Grease, grease, grease, and a million flies. It's horrible."
"Well, maybe you're right," he agreed with new interest.
"Well, I need the money to start in business, and Mr. Plumford heard of my map, and he offered me $1,000 cash for it, and also a quarter share if he finds the mine."
"He knows the map ain't worth an adobe dollar?"
"I told him what you said, but he's still insistent, and he has the most fascinating manner."
"Well, like all Englishmen," muttered the sheriff. "Obstinate as a mule." His voice raised. "Sure, sell it if he knows what he's buying, but you don't need the money, ma'am."
"Indeed I do."
"Pete left a sack of ore at the Gold Eagle. I gathered about 40 pounds together and sent it on stage to Denver for assayment. It runs $50 to the pound, and that gives you close to $2,000, Pat added.
"For a few pieces of rocks?"
The girl's voice was incredulous. "Nope, for the richest gold-bearing quartz that ever come out of the Crambrollas. Pay dirt is $250 a ton, and this ran $100,000 to the ton."
"Why, the mine must be worth millions."
"You aren't the only one who figured that out," he returned ironically. "Pete toted another sack to Danville, and I reckon that's what signed his death warrant."
"I think I'll sell the map for $2,000 and a quarter interest," she said reflectively. "That'll give me more money than I could ever spend if Mr. Plumford could find the mine."
It's your map, ma'am. When you make the deal, tell Plumford to drop over and see me. I got a hunch he's liable to stop some lead." The eyes of Shackleteeth Sampson, aged clerk of the Jewel Hotel, opened wide behind his thick lens glasses as a leaning-featured, mustached young fella clad in dust-covered tan silk shirt with neat black tie and tight-fitting riding breeches walked into the lobby. "Is Miss Ford in her room?" he inquired in a high-pitched drawl.
"Yes, well, leastways I guess so, mister,"
sputtered Shackleteeth with his upper plate loose these 10 years, played a tattoo against his lower teeth.
"Room 26, up the stairs to your right."
"Can you kindly inform her that
Mr. Percival Plumford is in the lobby?" "Well, see here, I ain't no—"
began Shackleteeth belligerently. Plumford carelessly slid a dollar across the glass-top showcase that served as a desk. With a grunt, the old clerk palmed it and hobbled towards the stairs. Phyllis had just returned from her visit to the sheriff. She tripped down the faded carpet of the stairway.
"Mr. Plumford, it's nice to see you again," she smiled.
"The pleasure is indeed mutual,"
he assured her stiffly. He indicated the rockers that lined the wall.
"Shall we sit down?"
"Did you know that the specimens of ore my uncle left with the sheriff were assayed?" she inquired.
"No, but I saw some samples in Dansville. It's devilish rich stuff."
"They assayed at 100,000 to the ton."
"Indeed,"
he returned.
"And," continued Phyllis coolly, "I've decided to sell you the map for $5,000 plus, of course, a quarter interest of the mine."
Plumford smoothed his tiny mustache.
"But in all honesty," she went on, "Mr. Stevens, the sheriff, says the map is useless. He tried to find the mine with it and failed."
"Isn't $5,000 a trifle high for a useless article?"
The Englishman watched her, with amusement in his frosty eyes.
"It would be cheap at $1 million if it wasn't," she flashed back.
"Well, that's plausible, but unconvincing," he muttered. "Of course, I realize I'm buying a pig in a poke. Perhaps you would allow a cursory glance at the map before we make a deal?"
Phyllis shook her head vigorously.
"You probably have an excellent memory, Mr. Plumford."
"You guarantee, of course, that that is the original? I understand it's been in other hands, the sheriff's, for instance."
"You're not suggesting that Mr. Stevens—"
she began indignantly. Plumford raised a slender hand. "I cast no aspersions. I merely seek assurance that I'm buying the genuine article." He reached into a pocket and produced a thick wallet. Abstracting a wad of bills, he carefully peeled off 25. "I hate to be commercial with a lady, but my offer is $2,500 and a quarter interest. It really seems slightly idiotic for a map that you admit is useless."
"I certainly don't," Phyllis returned crisply. "Uncle was too shrewd and too honest to leave me a useless map. I think perhaps Mr. Stevens misread it or lost his way."
"Or suffered a lapse of memory," tendered Plumford with a touch of malice. "Well, are you interested?" Phyllis nodded and opened her handbag and handed him a sheet of paper.
"That's the share agreement which Judge Bemis drew up. If you'll sign it, I'll give you the original map. I have a copy."
The Englishman's thin lips twitched.
"Few attractive young women are so businesslike."
He glanced through the agreement, rose and crossed to the hotel desk and scratched a signature upon the document. Phyllis stowed the currency and agreement in her handbag and then handed Plumford the folded map. He spread it out upon his knee, eye gleaming, as he examined it closely.
He commenced. It appears to be painstakingly drawn and very explicit. And what motive would your uncle have to mislead you? Perhaps your good sheriff failed to locate the mine? It's quite curious. Well, perhaps I shall have better luck.
He said he wants to see you before you leave town, said Phyllis, rising.
Plumford's eyebrows rose.
Indeed.
Yes, he says you might meet some lead.
Very intriguing,
muttered the Englishman. He folded the map and rose and then bowed stiffly.
It has been delightful to discover such a rose flowering in this drab cow town.
His eyes twinkled.
Well, perhaps next year, rolling in filthy lucre, you will charm Paris and Vienna and Rivera.
Powder Valley is good enough for me, returned Phyllis, and perhaps we had better find our gold before we spend it. Good day and good luck, Mr. Plumford.
The Englishman headed for the Golden Eagle. Pushing through the swinging doors, he peered around the saloon. It was mid-afternoon, and business was slack. A group of cowmen bunched at the further end of the bar. Amid the spread of the empty tables, a squat rider slumped alone, a half-empty bottle of beer before him. Plumford threaded through the tables. Bill Williams watched his approach with indifferent eyes. The Englishman dropped into a chair opposite of the rider.
Do you remember me, old chap?
Sure, the dude.
You appear a little downcast, observed Plumford. Would a stiff whiskey help?
Nothing will help, short of touching a match to the Wheeler schoolhouse, replied Bill.
Sorry, but I must draw the line at arson. Why such a drastic measure?
Oh, nothing else will stop that dance come Saturday.
It's probably perfectly plain to you, old chap.
The Englishman toyed with his smudge of a mustache in perplexity.
But I really don't follow. Are you violently predisposed against dancing?
No, I'm for shindigs, providing I ain't gotta take a girl that I don't wanna. Bill lifted his bottle of beer and shook his head sadly and put it down again untasted. Plumford smiled.
Well, then, my dear boy, my coming is providential. On Saturday, you will be far removed from music and dancing, unless, he hesitated, as I have reason to suspect, we trip a merry fandango to the tune of whistling bullets.
Hope spread into Bill's smoky eyes. Spread your hand, Plumford. I'm roped and hog-tied and just itching to bust the piggin' strings. Plumford stepped haughtily into Pat's lean-to. The sheriff glanced up and nodded. Sit down, he invited. The Englishman seated himself, eyes wary. You bought Pete's map?
Yes, he admitted curtly. Miss Ford and I have made a certain financial agreement.
Pat fiddled with the watch chain that was strung across his vest and eyed the Englishman curiously. Percival Plumford was a puzzle. Just where did he fit into this pattern of Pete's murder, or had he blundered into the picture just like a stray maverick? Plumford, he said abruptly, the map ain't worth a hoot, and I got a hunch there's a gang of high graders holding the Mirage right now. You stick your head beyond the wall, and you're liable to stop lead.
Well, I appreciate your concern for my safety.
The Englishman's voice held a mocking note. He pulled a silver cigar case from his pocket, nipped off the end of a cigar, and stuck it between his lips. He caught Pat's eyes and hastily extended the case.
Pardon my ignorance. I so seldom obtain these that I hoard them zealously.
The sheriff selected a smoke and stuck it into his shirt pocket.
How come you switched to stogies and the pipe sour on you?
Plumford lit up and luxuriously expelled the fragrant blue smoke.
Oh no, the briar is still my trusty standby, but on rare occasions a friend in New York sends me a box of choice Hanavans.
He rose.
Well, my dear sheriff, I will bear your warning in mind.
Again his voice held a note of mockery that irritated Pat. A question in his gray eyes, he watched Plumford's spare form fade into the doorway. The Englishman picked Bill up at the livery barn. The squat rider was buckling the khakis on his pack pony. Together they rode south, the pack animal tailing Bill as a hackmore.
Has it occurred to you, inquired Plumford, that the good sheriff may have mercenary motive in discouraging attempts to locate the Mirage Mine?
You cut the deck deeper, requested Bill. You best throttle your meanings with words.
Well, to call a spade, might he not wish to acquire the mine himself, or perhaps he's already located it?
See here, growled Bill, with storm circling in his eyes. Don't you be getting your rope tangled. Pat Stevens is just as straight as he shoots. He'd do to ride the river with on any day, yes, sir.
Oh, forget it, old boy, returned the Englishman hastily. I've no desire to make insinuations against your friends, but really blind loyalty does have its disadvantages.
Bill remained silent, squinting ahead at the deep rutted wagon road. Plumford, sensing hostility, changed the subject.
Do you wish me to call at the W Bar en route and present your regrets to Miss Rackstraw?
Mighty obliged if you would. I'd just as soon tackle a barrel of wildcats as that girl when she gets sore. Tell her I corralled Tim Holliday to take her to the dance if and she's out on a limb.
I know a maiden fair to see. You take care. She can both false and friendly be. Beware, beware,
muttered Plumford. Meanwhile, in his office, Pat Stevens had bitten the end off the Englishman's cigar and laid it on the desk, together with the butt he had picked up beside the stiffened remains of Pete Ford. Sam breezed in as he bent and sniffed each in turn. He gazed at the sheriff pittily.
You're sure on your yuppers, he commented scathingly, when you gotta mosey around snatching up butts from spittoons.
Oh, hold your horses, grunted Pat. Remember that butt we found at Pete's body? Well, Plumford's smoking the same brand. End of chapter 10.